it should be, it's connecting now. So
great, we are live. Okay. Hello, everyone online. Thank you for holding with us. I do see it loaded, so I think we're good. So thank you everyone for holding with us while we just picked up a little bug on our end. And we were just saying it was a good time for all of us to ground and take a breath, take a little stretch, maybe stream in from the trees coming in, take a little breath with the trees. So we'll go ahead and get started, and since we are a little bit in, we'll just do a bit of an abbreviated introduction. But thank you for joining us for the second season of our book club. You can feel free to go ahead and use the chat as you already have been and let us know where you're calling in from and perhaps a word of how you're feeling. A quick introduction of TRF. We are a 501c3 nonprofit that's dedicated to supporting and growing a community of clinicians, researchers, educators, and people whose lives are affected by trauma. And today we are gathered to review part 3 of Richard Schwartz's book, No Bad Parts. We're excited to have over 2,000 registrants, and we're really looking forward to next week where we're going to be inviting on the author himself, Dick Schwartz, for a live Q&A. And big gratitude to our partner IFS Institute, where we worked with them to put together a study guide for a companion for your reading and discovery with IFS. You should all have that in your members purchase content section on our website. We have invited 10 to 15 panelists this week to join us, and anyone is invited to apply. We have no qualifications in terms of being a mental health worker or clinician. We are really here to welcome a balanced and diverse spectrum of voices. For those following along on YouTube, feel free to comment with us along the way. We will be bringing that into the discussion, so we really look forward to hearing from you. We'll be discussing anywhere from 68 questions this week, and the crow's just chiming in. And if you find that you can't leave a comment, just know that you need to subscribe to our channel, Trauma Research Foundation, to do so. With that, I'd like to introduce our TRF team is all here helping us make this possible. Pat, our media manager, Laura, our program manager, Stephanie, our program specialist, and Abigail, who is our customer support specialist. So thank you all for your time, attention, and care to put this together. And now to introduce us to our book club moderator, Brendan O'Hara. He's been with us for season 1 when we did The Body Keeps the Score, and with us again for season 2. He's an athlete, creative professional who's passionate about trauma-informed therapy. And as an athlete, he recently completed his 50K ultra marathon, and last fall completed the Chad 1000 Fitness Challenge, and also raised thousands of dollars for TRF and the Navy SEAL Foundation. You can find some of his writing on the TRF blog, and he's also a graphic designer and photographer, and you can see some of that work at brendancreative.com. So thank you so much for being here with us again for the season, Brendan. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for that warm introduction, and welcome to everybody joining in through the live stream, and welcome to all our panelists, those who are new and those who are rejoining us from previous weeks. We're really excited to have you back, and I'm really excited to be back moderating this book club for No Bad Parts. It's just a fantastic book, and I love IFS. It's been instrumental in my trauma recovery, and I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to connect with you all and discuss this in a trauma-informed environment and help contribute to a more trauma-informed space community. So with that, I'll just run through a quick schedule. As Teresa said, this is week 3 of a 4-week book club discussing No Bad Parts. Today we'll be discussing part 3 of the book, which is Self in the Body, Self in the World. That's chapters 9 through 11. And next week will be a live Q&A with the author, Dr. Richard Schwartz. We're really excited about that, so be sure to tune in. And just some quick session guidelines. Please be gracious with differing opinions. Please take space and leave space for others. Panelists, please keep your shares under 2 minutes, and please stay on the topic of this week's topic, which is part 3, chapters 9 through 11. And for everybody joining through the live stream, all the panelists' bios will be shared in the live chat. So feel free to keep an eye on those if you'd like to learn more about our wonderful panels. Just some quick session guidelines. Please be gracious with differing opinions. Please take space. And some quick wellness recommendations. Some of the topics can be difficult at times, so we encourage everybody to please take care of yourselves by at any time. Feel free to take a pause, get your water. So feel stretch, deep breathing, naming 5 senses, and in the spirit of IFS, notice any parts that may be present and ask them to make space for self. And just a reminder for panelists, for everybody to stay on mute until we get into the questions, and then raise your virtual hand when it's time to answer a question. And with that, I'll give a quick overview of chapters 9 through 11
Deep breathing
in the book, just to provide context for our upcoming questions. So tormentors are life's difficult people and events that trigger us by tormenting us. They mentor us by triggering emotions and beliefs, which are protector parts, which can act as a trailhead leading to exiled parts that need healing. And one law of inner physics is that if we ask a part to not overwhelm us with emotion, then it won't. This allows us to get close to exiles without blending with them, increasing the chance of unburdening them and healing. And another law of inner physics is there's nothing inside of us that has any power over us if we're in self and not afraid of it. And legacy burdens are beliefs that have been unwillingly programmed into us by our environment. And racism is a common legacy burden in America, which can be treated with IFS. And lastly, some medications tend to prevent successful inner work by calming firefighters, which leads to less triggers and thus less inner feeling, which can inhibit inner healing work. So I hope that provides some nice context, a nice summary of part 3 of the book. So with that, we'll move into the questions. And question 1 is, what do you think about the idea that you can ask your parts to not overwhelm you? And have you experienced that? Ed, let's hear from you.
I had an experience yesterday that I'd like to share specifically on this question. My mother was dying some years ago, and there was a family member who was very angry, very upset, and very distraught. And I was trying to understand that family member. I was trying to see what part of that person was reacting. And I looked over at my father, and my father did something like this, just a quick, and I knew what he meant. And I went over to my family member and I put my arms around this person. And I was thinking about this family member. I went, oh, I remember this when I was a small child. I did the same thing with this family member. And then all of a sudden, something shot right out. What did my father do? Oh my goodness, there's a part of me that I've never seen before. All he had to do was give me a look. So there's something inside of me, and I felt very overwhelmed at that moment. It was a complete shock. It was not where I was going to go. And I had to calm down and say, you're in the present. There's nothing threatening you right now. You're all right. This can never happen again because he's passed on. And I had to do some self-care to that part. And by the way, I call this part little man now, that when he was a little boy, he had to do this for his younger siblings. And all of a sudden, here I am as of yesterday with a brand new part. And so this question hit me quite a bit, that I had to really work. And since then, I've been really working to calm this person down. So there's my answer.
Thank you, Ed. An excellent example of parts work, live in action and effective. So that's
thank you.
Great work, Ed. Thank you so much. Achra, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I had a hard time with this question, actually, because I had a part that didn't believe. I felt like there were parts that were arguing with themselves about it, if I'm really truly transparent and curious. And I had to really get curious about, asking them to step back. And there's a part of me that's like, well, you don't have permission to ask that part to calm down or to sit down or whatever it was. There was just a battle going on. So after exploring it more, right, and doing more parts work and understanding that self does have permission to ask parts not to overwhelm you. It does lead to more compassionate curiosity. I had a situation yesterday where without parts work, I don't think that I would have been able to ask my part that felt that I was being controlled, or my part that felt that I was, dealing with emotions of, I don't know, contempt or whatever it was that I was feeling. Had I not been able to understand the concept of asking my part to not overwhelm me, I wouldn't have been able to get that space that we talk about that we need from that, to find compassionate curiosity and get to know really what was underneath it.
Right, thank you. And it's interesting. I just had no idea that it was even possible. So to read this in this book, it was just, I just see the world differently now. If an anxious part emerged in the past, it was completely overwhelming. But now, I'm aware of those bodily cues, and I can sort of say, okay, there's an anxious part present, you can take a break. So thank you, Atra. Appreciate it. Thank you. Vivian.
Hi, I find this a really interesting question. I'm just totally new to IFS, and this is the first book I've read on it, and it just absolutely resonated with me. Throughout my own healing recovery, I have called parts versions, and one of the versions of me, when she feels like she can be or will be, or there's a potential that she might be overwhelmed, she takes notes. So I have a book of notes here. And what I wrote is, once my parts know that we can remain in the moment, all of us together, that we are making space for spectators. So we're making space for other parts of me to just sit and just be a silent witness to what's going on, that they're seen and that they're validated. And that the meaning of that means that they no longer have to be overwhelmed because they're part of the whole system. They realize that they're included, that there's no threat of them having to take over or to be exiled at all. And this, as well as this happening when I was writing this out, it usually happens when I feel like I'm experiencing imposter syndrome. So it's it's something that I find really helpful.
Thank you, Vivian. Excellent share. Really appreciate that. And Laura, let's hear from you.
Yeah, Vivian said it probably better than I will. My view is that parts are overwhelming me because they are shouting in pain or fear, or they want to fight, or they are very unhappy. And as soon as I or somebody else is willing to listen to them, sort of communicate with them, there is no need to be overwhelmed. So I have very many thinking parts, and they need to have it logical. So it's really helping to say, well, if you overwhelm, we will lose the contact, and we can't help you. So if you just separate a little bit so that I can see you and hear you and help you, and then just the parts like, wow, what? I don't have to fight. I don't have to cry in pain. So yeah, at the beginning when I saw this, I was just thinking, well, there's some knob to turn on the volume like a radio. This doesn't make any sense. But gradually, yes, it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I'm very happy that this exists and that it works. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And we have time for one more response. Let's hear from Linda.
Yeah, again, from the viewpoint of somebody who, was this supposed to be me? Yeah, of somebody who has had just a little experience of some IFS sessions. when I saw this, I thought, excuse me, how would you ever get them to say yes, to step aside or to be quiet? Because these parts that tend to be overwhelming are like their whole history is of being dominant, urgently dominant. So, ask them to be quiet. Why would they ever do that? And I'd listened on my audiobook to Dick Schwartz doing this with people. And, he would say, would you just ask that part if they would mind going to the waiting room? Would they do that? And the people said yes. The parts said yes. See, I can't still distinguish. And I thought, wow, how did he do that? Why did they let him do that? And yeah, I'm just beginning to see through this mysterious phenomenon.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, it becomes a lot easier when we grasp the idea that, in the context of an anxious part, for example, that the anxiety is not us and it's not internalized in us. It's just a part of us. And when we can grasp that idea, that's the vehicle that can allow us to ask it to step aside in that waiting room. Thank you, Linda. Let's check in with Teresa to see what our book club members are saying on the live chat.
Thank you, Brendan. Well, I have lots of crows chiming in behind me. Besides them, Carolyn on YouTube has let us know that it often works for her, though not always. She used to have panic attacks and haven't had one in a long time. It's amazing. Julie chimed in and said, as someone new to IFS, it is very assuring to know that parts can be asked not to overwhelm. I guess self, capital S self, would be asking this of parts or the therapist alongside the client. And Healing Companions also said, I ask the overwhelmed part what does it need? Back to you.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing the comments in the live chat. Please keep the chatter going. And I can really relate to the panic thing. IFS has been really helpful for me for that too. So we'll move on to question 2. Do you have parts that keep you from being in your body? Can you get curious about why that is? What are they afraid might happen if you were embodied? And just to provide context, embodied in No Bad Parts, Dr. Richard Schwartz explains embodied as when we are able to access our full self by asking our parts to step back and give space. Nadine, let's hear from you.
Hi, thank you, Brendan.
Sure.
So I have asked some parts to not overwhelm me. I have some anxious parts right now. And so I have asked for them not to overwhelm me, and hopefully they'll maintain that. So I do have parts that keep me from being in my body, and I do get very curious about them. And I really can access that curiosity when I'm in therapy. It's often difficult when I'm by myself because the parts that keep me from being in my body are the parts that are protecting me from the trauma of either remembering trauma that I had as a child, and their fear is that I'm going to re-experience it if they become embodied, if I have contact with my exiles, or so they also think, and I've heard this is really common. I've also heard that, and this is true for me, that some of my parts think that I'm going to go crazy and end up in the hospital if they, sort of let me, well, there's a fear that I'm going to relive, the trauma. And there are even parts of me that are afraid that I will die. So I don't mean to be like so dramatic, but I know that it's really common, and I really wanted to kind of normalize it for everyone. And I'm curious to know what others also have to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nadine. Appreciate that vulnerability. And that is quite common. I can relate to it. I'm sure everybody tuning into our session can too. So thank you for sharing. And Nadine is from the organization PATH, which stands for Path to Addiction and Trauma Healing. And Nadine, do you want to take a minute to give a little plug for PATH?
Absolutely.
Sure.
So PATH stands for, as you said, Path to Addiction and Trauma Healing. We're a nonprofit organization that is fairly new. And what we do is provide free online support group meetings for folks who are recovering in recovery from any addiction, and also healing from trauma. And we believe that it's important to focus on the trauma underlying the addiction, because that's what's driving the addiction. So we really like to focus on that. We have about 10 meetings a week, and we're having a meeting right after the book club. So I hope to see a lot of you there.
Excellent. Thanks, Nadine. And we'll drop a link in the live chat if you'd like to join that PATH meeting. Anybody is welcome, and we encourage you to check it out. So feel free to join. Thank you, Nadine. Annie, let's hear from you.
Yeah, thank you, Nadine. I could almost just say ditto. So you're not alone. I do have those parts that want to keep me in my head, and I lived in my head for a very long time. And I really could say just about everything Nadine said about the fear and that I would die and I would go crazy and all of those things that lived in my head and wouldn't let me be in my body. And I think one thing to add is, though, one reason they're afraid, they've been my protectors, these parts that have protected me my entire life. And I think they're afraid I might not need them anymore. And so I take the time to talk with them and let them know, one, I'm grateful for how they protected me my whole life. And two, they still have a seat at the table. I still might need them in certain situations, and I might need their energy in different ways. And so I think part of it is their fear that they might not be needed anymore.
That's a great point, Annie. And also that those parts, they are needed, and they're also, not only that, but they're also able to evolve into roles that are more serving of ourself. So thank you, Annie. Nick, let's hear from you.
Thank you. The way that I see this question is, or the way that I see this structure, is that these parts are afraid that the other parts are doing it wrong. And that if they're not heard and listened to, something bad is going to happen. So looking at the burden, I think is very key for me. This idea that if I had a burden, if myself had a burden, and I thought that someone around me that I cared for would be in trouble if I didn't accomplish this, then yeah, I would want to take over. And so I see the same thing with these parts. And I think it's similar to question one in the sense that to get past overwhelm from these different parts, or to stay embodied and centered, landing in the idea that we all have the same top level goal has been very key for me. And that allows me to drop back into where I am, and these parts quiet down.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, I can really relate to the idea of something bad is going to happen. I think that's sort of like the ambiguous, might sound over dramatic, but it's valid, because these are parts that are speaking for experiences that they have had in the past, where something did bad happen, or was potential to happen if they weren't there to protect me. So yeah, I can really relate to that. Thank you, Nick. And Laura, let's hear from you again.
Yeah, I have a developmental trauma disorder and CPTSD, which means that I had quite a lot of neglect when I was a child. My mom had a psychosis, and then from 15 months I was in the care of my grandmother, who didn't want me. So I developed this, threat and flight. So I am on constant alert. But I noticed, so I don't have a part that would abandon me, although I live in head. So I have 2 PhDs, my intellectual capacity. So I can't afford body. But I have noticed that in surgery, when I had some mini surgeries and no anesthetics or just local anesthetics, and it was very painful, that I could see my parts and self leaving the body and just watching, just to avoid the pain. So, and I thought, wow, this is so interesting. And then I have had some clients who were really sexually abused, and this is what they did when there was so much pain. So I am happy for these parts that we can use them if there is so much pain, but I am also happy that I don't have them on a permanent basis. And if I may say just one thing, I really vouch for the PATH groups. I am a member of many IFS groups, and the IFS PATH, we have a small group in UK on Monday 9 o'clock, which is already established. So we are reading Somatic IFS. We are at the end of Somatic IFS by Susan McConnell. And these groups have very safe structure. And it's the most beautiful and longest group I have been. It's free and it's just, and I would recommend it to even the most severely traumatized people, because the protocol, the script is so safe that, and still open for sharing. And it's very powerful and very healing. So thank you, Nadine. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Absolutely. Thank you for that plug. And, we really encourage all the tools that are trauma informed, PATH being a fantastic one and very accessible, and that it's and that it is free and it's virtual, and there are several sessions per week. So we really encourage, again, be on the lookout for the link in the live chat. And we'll hear from one more panelist on question 2. How about Sandra?
Hello.
Hi.
Actually, I just ran into this particular dynamic recently. First time ever, a blocker came in, and I did get curious right away. Okay, what's going on here and why is that happening? And I like the way the questions are laid out because it was fear. And I instinctively knew that it was reasonable. So that was very helpful. But afraid, what are you afraid of? And the response was interesting. Overwhelming emotion, that just too much emotion, too strong, was scary. And so actually I had been working on that. So I assured this part that I was here and it wasn't going to overwhelm today, and asked them to step aside and I'd come back to them later, and I was able to continue on with the work that I was doing. So I really love this because I've just had the experience. Thanks for the opportunity to share.
Excellent. Thanks, Sandra. And I really like hearing these anecdotal examples of IFS in action. And, when we ask them, what are they afraid, what are you afraid might happen? When you say that to a part, really gives insight into what our hidden exiles, those elusive exiles, might be thinking and driving our underlying behavior that we might not see. So thanks, Sandra. Appreciate that. And let's check in with Teresa to see what our book club members are saying on the live chat.
Thank you, Brendan. As always, a very supportive community showing up for one another. So we have Rick that shared, when the part detects that we are showing up with genuine self, it will trust a little. Heather then sharing, I am quite blended with a part that likes to have non-days, days where I just tune out. And yes, I feel that this happens when I don't want to feel too deeply. And Eleanor sharing, this morning I talked to anxiety, the frantic part, because it came to me when she protects, which is an overwhelmed child when the all is well manager can't handle triggers or intensity it can't handle. So thank you so much to the online audience for sharing your experiences. Brendan?
Thank you, Teresa. And thank you to our book club members participating in the live chat. Keep those comments coming. We'll move on to question 3. Why is it difficult to get permission from protectors to re-embody? Atra, let's hear from you.
Good. Actually, I thought it was that was a different question. I clicked too soon.
Oh, okay. Do you want to take it?
I have a oops part. Yeah, I'm happy to pass to somebody else who hasn't answered.
Sure. No worries.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no
Thanks,
problem
Atra.
at all. Yeah.
David.
Thank you, Brendan. My experience, both personally and as a coach, is that typically the protectors do not want to give permission because they do not feel the exile is quite ready to deal with the trauma. And so it takes, if you can't get the protector to step back, might have to do some direct access with the protector until it's ready to let us work with the exile.
Absolutely. The protector often thinks that we're still vulnerable and we're still not able to fully protect ourselves, right?
Exactly.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Christine.
Hi, yeah, it's difficult to get protectors to allow re-embodiment. This is piggybacking off of the last question, where they are scared that I'm not going to be able to handle the situation, kind of how you were saying, Brendan, that they think, I'm still 5 or 13 or whatever age things happened. So they don't want to feel that pain. And of course they're guarding the exiles also, like David said. So it's a lack of trust. Ultimately, what I'm finding with my communication, what I've had so far with my parts, it's a lack of trust in being protected by me and my actions. And then, the lack of information of what the reality is today at what age I am today.
That's a great way to put it, a lack of trust. And once we start asking our parts, our protectors to give space, and then they realize, wow, yourself is capable of being okay without us protecting you, then they're able to increasingly step back more and more, and possibly over time evolve to a non-protective role. So thanks, Christine. Vivian.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You mentioning the word trust, Christine, because for me, through various different things, I've come up with this term of emotional Gaviscon. And when I feel like I'm starting to be overwhelmed, or I feel like in a position where there's of pain or discomfort, it's almost like as soon as I swallow, I can feel that disassociation, just can't feel anything from the body on the way down. And through years, having difficult childhood, having adverse childhood experiences, it's that fear that my body will betray me again. So that, having permission from the protector to just be like, right, don't use this emotional Gaviscon, just sit with it and just feel it, allows me to re-embody and to come back into myself.
Thanks, Vivian. I like you touching on the actual tangible feeling that we have of being aware that we're in our body. And I think that re-embody word is just, it's a great way to describe it. Being able to come back into our bodies and have a sense of being in our bodies, when protectors can often, like we described in the last question, can totally distract us from being in our bodies. So excellent point. Hope.
I agree about building trust. And when I was thinking about this question, I thought about how initially my body didn't trust me because I had neglected it for so long and ignored it. So doing things like making doctor's appointments for my body, eating food that felt good, cutting back on my schedule and not overcommitting to things, even buying clothes that are nice, that I feel good in, going out in nature, all of these things started to build trust with my body. And it's kind of like reestablishing a relationship with my body. Thank you.
Excellent, Hope. That's a fantastic way to put it. And I can relate and totally agree. And I think this is a fantastic way to get in touch with our bodies. And that is one way that, as we discussed in the last question, that's one way that sometimes I have a part that takes me out of my body is by overpacking my schedule. Because if I have so many things packed into my schedule, then I can easily ignore and be distracted by what's going on here. So totally relate. Thanks, Hope. And okay, let's check in with, so we have time for one more response. Ed, let's hear from you.
Thank you, Brandon. It's a view I've had before. Our society, and I like how Dick in his book says, we manhandle troublesome parts. And I found that I do that. And I think that, again, I'm going to go back to toxic or fragile masculinity idea, is it's hard to get permission because we're told just to listen to them, just to go with them, just to ignore who they're protecting. And so it's, in a way, you're really fighting back against the societal pressure of don't feel those things, don't get in touch with those things. So in a way, for those of us who are practicing IFS, we've got to look at what our culture is telling us. And in many ways, it's telling us not to re-embody these things.
Yeah, to just bury them and forget about them, which obviously when that happens, they don't go away. They're there. And they can manifest as exiles, which make them even more elusive and more difficult to treat. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Ed. Nick.
This is a concept that I find very powerful. The idea of trust, I think, is huge, but very much also integrity to self. Have I managed to keep my word to myself in a way that my different parts believe that I'll be okay if they calm down? Safety and permission, I think, are so huge. Safety and trust to build permission. And so I forget who said it earlier, but building that relationship back up to self, I find to be key with the people that I work with, and it's been key in my own life.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because these protectors think the end of the world is going to happen if they don't protect, and it's hard to talk them out of that. It's a challenge, but through IFS we're able to do that. So appreciate it. Thanks, Nick. Let's check in with Teresa, see what our book club members are saying in the live chat.
Thanks, Brendan. Everyone in the chat seems to be really coming along with the conversation as well, and very on cue to what Nick was just sharing, which is around how do we build trust? And Healing Companions was also pointing out, that everyone experiences parts differently, and important thing to remember. Heather then commented and said, putting forward the question, how do we build that trust? And for her, what she's been trying is listening more. However, that can be difficult because there's been so many years of not trusting. And Carolyn then shared that her parts are very slowly learning to trust herself, that they've been hurt for a long time. And then another 2 words just around self-compassion. Thank you, Brendan, back to you.
Thanks, Teresa. Yeah, I found the path exercise in the earlier part of the book really helpful and like a nice introductory exercise in asking parts to step back and trust self. It's sort of a gentle way to do it, and you can do it by yourself. And hearing the audio version of the book and having the author walk you through it is really nice. So I found that a helpful exercise. Moving on to question 4. How does improving our inner relationships improve our outer ones? Candida, let's hear from you.
Thanks, Brandon. I think, the beauty of IFS is that it's like a direct line to compassion. And so both for myself and for anyone I'm interacting with, it's so much easier to understand and not get triggered. I think that part of what happens when you start to make space to listen to your own parts and not blend and react from parts, it's also easier than to not blend or react to other people's parts or to their defensiveness. And like Dick says in his book, the contagion effect of like, the more I embody self and am able to be calm and curious, the more I invite other people to do that. And then of course, sort of the mass effect of more harmony and just resonance, I think, for humanity.
Yeah, thank you, Candida. And yeah, I thought that it was a great point. And if an angry part manifests with somebody on the street, that's contagious. It's most likely going to result in bringing out an angry protector part in the other person. But also, self energy is also contagious. That's something that Dick mentions in the book, and showing compassion for others is contagious too. So yeah, excellent point. Thank you, Candida. Alex.
Well, thank you. I think a great example of this is the conversation that he had with Andy in chapter 10, where he was discussing the anti-racist views that he had. So he was working on anti-racist activities, but at the same time, he had anti-racist or racist beliefs too. So I loved how he worked through the parts and with IFS. And it can shift the way that he was working now from a different place, not from those beliefs, but from wanting to make a change. I can see that IFS can help us to shift our own views of recent world events where we may have some issues or anxiety or some reactions to it. It's an opportunity for us to observe, and maybe for some world events, we can change the narrative from anti-racist to pro-inclusion or to pro something else, but not fighting against something if we come from a different place. I can also see that this can be applied to homophobia, for example, or to other issues. So I loved how he can distinguish that if we come from a different place, we can get different results. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Alex. I thought that was a really courageous part of the book and so important in today's context, and shows how those legacy burdens can be addressed through IFS, which, when they are, results in more compassion for other groups or other people that we might have had these legacy burdens unwillingly pushed on us through culture or family or other experiences. So thank you, Alex. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's see. Annie, let's hear from you.
Yeah, thank you, Brendan. I think it's been touched on a bit, but that part of how if we're operating out of self, then we're speaking for our parts and not through them. But one thing comes to mind is that whole concept of tormentors. And so if I am improving my inner relationships and I am embodying self, when a tormentor comes into my life, whether it's an event or a person, I'm going to respond in a better way. I'm not going to be triggered and react. I'm going to engage in a good relationship practice with that person or that event. And so for me, that's what I think about as I nurture my inner parts. I then can turn around and see that someone else or the situation is because of someone else acting out of their parts. And I then have that opportunity to do a repair of relationship through the 8 C's of myself. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Annie. It's fantastic, fantastic way to apply parts work to the tormentors in our lives. Not easy work, not easy, but certainly does increase the potential for improved relationships without a doubt. So thank you, Annie. Vivian.
Yes, I love the way Annie said about, responses and reactions. And I think improving your inner relationship guides you more towards having responses, because you're more aware of what's actually happening inside, rather as giving the control to what's happening outside, which is going to impact the relationships that you have on the outside. But what I wrote was that hugely, when we accept and value people without the need for judgment, and that comes from having our own interpretations of our own behaviour, of our own emotion, and regulation of our own body language and our own bodily sensations. It also means that we have greater access to the body. So we have greater access to be able to identify and be familiar with trailheads.
Thank you, Vivian. It really is amazing. One thing that this book highlighted for me, how much energy is transmittable from one person to the other, from inner parts of ourselves to inner parts of the other, and reciprocal, but also, like we said earlier, self energy as well. So thank you, Vivian. Atra.
Hi, yeah, I think this is such a good question. It can be applied on so many layers, right? The thing that sticks out to me though, like IFS has helped tremendously with my marriage and so forth, but the thing that sticks out to me is, he says on page 161, there's nothing inside of you that has any power if you are not in self and not afraid of it. And then he talks about the concept of, if self, capital S, is indeed a drop of the divine within, that it makes sense that an unblended self wouldn't be intimidated by anything. And so that's inner and outer, right? We talk about in our meditation practices to take that self energy. He talks about taking that self energy with you. And so one of the goals of IFS is to decrease reactivity in situations. And so that's going to improve our trust and secure attachment with ourselves and our parts. And then it's also going to, like Annie was talking about, help us to look past, when he was talking about tormentors, looking past kind of the behaviors of people and really what's underneath, to get into that compassion and curious part. And then that kind of gets you to a place where you're like, okay, this person who I would normally write off, maybe I won't, because this is really what's behind what's going on. And so I don't have to necessarily take it personally. And that's actually what happened in my marriage. I would see, oh, well, my husband may be upset, but he's maybe taking it out of me, and it's not right for you to do that. But then I would get underneath, the goal, he is for me, I am for him, we're a team. How can I get compassionate and curious and get clarity on what's really going on? And it's helped tremendously.
Yeah, it allows us to see the world through a different lens, and tormentors and difficult situations through a different lens. And, rather than seeing the angry person, seeing the angry part in the other person, for example, and understanding, oh, I have one of those. I know what that's like. It's awful. And it comes from a sad, haunting, traumatic place. And, that precipitates a sense of compassion rather than reciprocating in anger. So yeah, great point. Thanks, Atra. David.
Thanks, Brandon. For me, it boils down to who is driving my system today. And the other individuals have answered this question so well. And that's why I try to keep it simple when I'm first dealing with people and they're talking about how their parts have offended someone or they came out so angry. And I basically asked them who was speaking for them during that conversation. Were they speaking from self, or was that an angry part or a sad part or a humiliated part, et cetera, et cetera. So I think Dick does just a marvelous job of using language to convey how important it is to improve and be aware of the interrelationships that we have, so we can impact our outer relationships from a more spiritual, more self-oriented position.
Thanks, David. I like that simplicity approach. That's it. And that's sometimes how I think of it too, is who's driving the bus? You know, who's driving my bus today? Who's driving my bus right now? Or in a certain situation, you know, which part is driving the bus? Or sometimes which part feels like it's hijacking the plane, you know? So that's a great way to sort of ground ourselves and become aware of which parts are present. Great point. Thanks, David. Laura.
Yeah, it was already said. Everything important was already said. So I will just give an example. I was on Saturday morning, I was cycling from one of the colleges, and we had a very successful rehearsal, and I was in a good mood. And I just noticed that people who I'm passing, they were just smiling at me, and I just thought, what's going on? Why is everybody so happy? And it's the relational field, it's the energy. And then I realized, well, they must feel that I am, you know, I'm in a playful, I have the 5 P's and 8 C's and 11 I's, and you know, there's all the 6 B's from the indigenous circles, and it was really surprising that if I am happy, if I'm, you know, if my nervous system is sort of, then other people can feel it in meters. So the relational field is tangible. And so it's not, and we know that 95% of communication is nonverbal. So the words are important, yes, very much. But the happiness and the nervous system being okay, you know, and that's the body language is very important. So yeah, that's if we get better insight, then everybody else is happy.
Absolutely. Thanks, Laura. Yeah, I think that's one thing that I think sometimes we underestimate or can lose sight of. I know I do, or especially have in the past, is just not being aware that sometimes my parts manifest and sort of reveal themselves without me even saying anything. Whether, you know, it's a happy, joyful part like Laura just described, or a sad part. And there's no camera on me and I can't see myself from outside, so I don't realize that that's happening. So that's a nice example, nice joyful example. Let's check in with Teresa, see what our book club members are saying in the live chat.
Thanks, Brendan. We have some great comments. Carolyn chiming in and saying that her and her husband have a better relationship largely because of IFS. When they recognize their parts are reacting, they actually stop fighting before they even start. And Joanna chimed in to say, I love how self-expression expressed as loving our tormenting parts helps us to make room and to not take personally anger or negative emotions from others. And Healing Companion said, I find hijacking negative and judgmental versus embracing the part with compassion. Back to you.
Thanks, Teresa. Thank you for those comments in the live chat. And moving on to question 5. There are no bad parts, but what parts trouble you the most? Linda, let's hear from you. Which parts trouble you the most? Oh, still on mute, Linda.
Unmute. Okay, got it. Yeah, I pre-answered this question, so here goes. So I have either a part or maybe more than one, but that relentlessly causes physical symptoms and dissociation. So there's the struggle to either endure it or to get free from this experience. That troubles me the most. If the source of this can be called a part, it's very primordial, it's very deep. So hard to communicate with. So that's the part that troubles me the most, as far as I know.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for that personal example. Laura, likely.
Hi.
Hi.
So the parts, it's interesting, there are parts that trouble me the most, and then there are parts that scare other parts the most. So I'm kind of going to answer it in two different directions. Probably my own racist parts. That was really hard for me to swallow, that I had racist parts. Growing up progressive in a progressive school where everybody was, we were 50-50 black and white. That was really hard for me to have to recognize as things unfolded with the murder of George Floyd, that I also had racist parts. And then also to realize I had privilege. So those are the things that are hardest for me as a whole. But I have parts that scare other parts, and that is always interesting to me. I have parts that like to abuse alcohol and food, and I haven't done that for quite a while now, but those parts can scare other parts in the system, parts that worry that those parts will take over again, that firefighter energy will take over in an effort to numb and help. So and I do recognize there are no bad parts, but certainly I have parts that scare other parts. And then the parts that trouble me most are my racist parts and the recognition that I have privilege that I did not earn. Those are the parts that worry me. Thanks, Brendan.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, and Dick references in the book that, racist parts are, at least in America, just ubiquitous, due to our country's history of racism and it being a legacy burden that's so common within all of us. So sure we can all relate to having, unfortunately, having a racist part. So thank you, Laura. Let's see, check with, how about Sandra?
I actually like this question because the parts that I find most troubling are the firefighters. And the reason is because they haven't, when I discovered them, they seem to have no boundaries, no limits, they're just there. And then when they act full bore and scare me to death, take over, etc. So I like that their aggression is so real. But the part that I like is what I've been learning from Dick about how when I ask them to step back, that they actually do. And I talk to them like my mama bear, and I say, now look, I really appreciate you. You're important to me. That you're paying attention and all that. If you could just soften your approach so that it doesn't cause me to react, that would be really helpful. And she does that now. So it bears out what Dick is saying. But also when he says, which is a new one, if I'm not afraid of those parts, then it's okay because the other parts aren't going to be afraid of them either. It takes away their power. And so taking on some of the ones, one of the other ones, not Mama Bear. Well, Mama Bear, I'm not afraid of her anymore. And so she's great. I do have a firefighter somewhere that I have to identify and take the teeth away from. But the things that Dick talks about are just playing out in my life. And so, yeah, firefighters are the bad one, the troublesome ones, but I'm not afraid of them anymore.
Excellent. Yeah, firefighters can be necessary, but a necessary evil at times.
Yes.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you.
Christine.
Well, that's a really good segue into my answer because, and I know it's a process and I'm working through it, but the part that troubles me the most is it troubles me. It's the warrior. It's like Braveheart in the movie Braveheart, and it comes to my protection and to protection of other people around me. And the part that troubles me with it is that I like it. It makes me feel safe. And what's going to happen if that part, you know, dissipates into its true purpose, which is probably going to be something really creative. But in the meantime, how am I going to help protect other people and myself? So there's like this fear there. And I know it's a process and all that, but it's just, I like that it's there because it took me so long to get it there. Like it took me so long to be able to speak up. And now that I can, I feel that me having a voice now comes partly from that part. So it's like I'm scared to let it go.
I hear you, Christine. Thank you. Nick, let's hear from you.
Thank you. The part that troubles me the most, and this links to the previous question, and I like how one leads into the other, but the part that frustrates me the most about me also frustrates me the most about the world, society. And so the micro and the macro are very linked. And it's apathy. It's the part of me that thinks, what's the point? None of it's going to work anyway. How can we dig ourselves out of the hole that we've created? And yeah, so it's interesting to watch how parts that I've healed inside myself don't bother me as much externally, but the parts that are left frustrating me still frustrate me in the exterior as well. But yeah, the part that just wants to give up is the part that frustrates me the most.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I can relate to that. And my perfectionist part, my apathetic part fight each other sometimes. So yeah, I can relate to that. Alex, let's hear from you.
Love this question because I can see it clearly. The part that troubles me the most is the part that tells me that I could be doing something bigger because I've invested resources, time, and money, and I could be doing something bigger. And with this work, I now get curious and ask where those expectations or ideal life is coming from. And this is work in progress for me, but that's the one that troubles me the most.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. Let's hear from David. David, let's hear from you.
I think the parts that really trouble me the most are the legacy parts. Ed referred to this with another question about what a real man would do or how a real man should act or how you should step up or how you should treat a certain race or behave towards women. They can pop up for me almost as quickly as can a firefighter part. And I am not so much afraid of those parts, but I continue to be surprised about how quickly they show up at certain times.
Thanks, David. Yeah, that's a great point. You know, especially the legacy burden relating to men with respect to mental health. You know, I think that's a pervasive legacy burden. You know, how do men deal with a mental health issue? You know, often it's to bury it, we're taught to ignore it or to drink it or, insert any firefighter to deal with it. But anything but actually deal with it. So thank you for that legacy burden example. Let's check in with Teresa, see what they're saying in the live chat.
Thank you, Brendan. So Carolyn was sharing with us that though there are no bad parts, what part troubles her the most is her procrastinator. She finds it difficult to be compassionate with that part. JJ let us know that they relate very much with what Laura said, and that they struggle the most with the nonverbal primordial parts that cause physical issues. And another comment from Carolyn in response to Nick, thanking you for that very honest answer, and that she also has a why bother part 2, and that it causes her to procrastinate. Back to you.
Thanks, Teresa. And moving on to question 6. What parts of yourself or others do you now see differently after reading this book? Candida.
Thanks, Brendan. I guess there's sort of this overall sense of not needing to fear any parts, which has been, immensely helpful in seeing parts like the bullying parts or the meaner parts that kind of speak unkindly. I think I've learned, and one part in particular, this, I call it my Chicken Little part, the always the end of the world kind of part that would get really annoying. And somehow, I don't know, Dick frames it as just, nothing has power when you're in self. And so that just shifts being into compassion so quickly and being able to see all the parts and especially in other people. I think, that first question about asking parts to step back and not get overwhelmed, this book in particular, I think has helped me do that in group settings. Say if I'm, where their parts are getting overwhelmed and being able to say, like, to appeal to the parts that want to help and sort of saying, like, I need you to step back so that I can show up to help you with this overwhelm. And watching that happen has just been really magical. And yeah, I think that's all I had to say about that one.
Thanks, Candida. Yeah, it's a different feeling, right? Like, we can start seeing people and their parts rather than just the people. And that opens up that space for
so
the
much space.
ACs, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I can relate. Thank you, Candida.
Thanks.
Let's see. Let's hear from Hope.
When I went through the mapping exercise on page 26, I became aware of how my parts were reacting and interplaying, the relationships they had with each other, the polarizations. I have a part that was very frustrated with somebody, but I also have a part that's ashamed that I would be frustrated and I wouldn't like someone. So the shame started to flood in, and then I had a part that wanted to just distract me from shame, because shame is a very hard emotion to feel. And then I had parts that wanted to tell the story and a part that wanted to figure everything out. So doing the mapping exercise allowed me to really see the relationship that I had between this group of parts, which was really beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks, Hope. Yeah, it's really wild to, when we consciously take inventory of parts and to see they seem to multiply. We seem to start noticing various parts, and then once we dig into those parts, other parts that are derivative of those parts that are sort of lurking in the shadows behind those parts, and how many parts do exist and how they interplay. So yeah, thank you. Let's see, haven't we heard from in a little while? Nadine, let's hear from you.
Hi. So I actually answered this question similar to how other people have answered previous questions. And for me, it was learning about tormentors. And I see other people very, very differently now than I used to. Before, if somebody triggered me, I would probably call them a name, like, stupid or something. And now I recognize that people have parts. And while I still have parts that may call people names, they can see people as having these parts that are not their true self. And so I like the definition in the book that a tormentor is, they mentor you about what you need to heal, and that the emotions they trigger are usually valuable trailheads. So like for me, instead of being blended and going down the rabbit hole, if I feel criticized from somebody on the outside in the past before IFS, I would probably feel pretty worthless and be like, oh yeah, I suck. And then, but now I can unblend and I can investigate them, which leads me to my own exiles. So that's what IFS has helped me do for myself and others. Thanks.
Thanks, Nadine. Yeah, I might use a stronger word than calling somebody stupid, but I can relate. But yeah, I think that's the same thing that I thought of. I see my tormentors differently now, and you know, I see them in a different perspective, and I see their parts, and that's still a big challenge for me. I can't, you know, I'm still working on being. It's really difficult to do that in the moment. You know, sometimes I just have to collect myself and concentrate on trying to do it afterwards. It's hard to do it in the moment, but I think that just comes with practice. So thank you, Nadine. Yeah, I agree. Check in with Annie.
Thanks, Brendan. Yeah, when the question was first posed, my first thought was all of them. You know, which parts do I see differently? Absolutely all of them. I think this book is profoundly powerful, and it allowed me to see a part of myself that I actually identified as, instead of it being a part of me. And that part of me is anxiety and panic attacks and OCD and all those things that, you know, protected me. And for the first time in over 5 decades, I was able to speak to that part and engage with that part in a different way. And I no longer identify as that. I am self, and I am all those 8 C's. And, you know, with anxiety, it's courage that I need the most. And so now, because of this book and because of just diving into it, and for anyone who hasn't done the Audible version, please do that for yourself. Having Dr. Schwartz walk you through these exercises is, first of all, it's just a gift. And I guess that's all I have to say. It's such a gift. And in doing that is when I was able to see this part and unburden myself and work with that part. And it has been life-changing. Thank you.
Excellent, Annie. So glad to hear. And I second that. You know, if you're able to get a hold of the audiobook of this, I just think the exercises in it where Dick walks you through it, I second what Annie said. They're just fantastic, and I use them repeatedly. So they're just a great tool to have in our tool belts. So thanks, Annie. How about Linda?
Yeah, what I take away from this book is the bottomless depth of compassion that it opens up. And it makes me feel the possibility of stopping fighting, stopping hating, and stopping trying to kill.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Ed, let's hear from you.
I got one major thing out of this book. First of all, I love the 8 C's, and I've kind of adopted 3 of them as a little clue for me. It is curious, compassionate, and calm. And when I feel an emotion, I stop and say, okay, now, are those 3 curious, compassionate, or calm? No, they're not. Okay, I've identified another part here. But what has really helped me the most is I can now see what I now call my true self. And it really has brought me a sense of calm. When I go to that place, this is who I really am, my true self. Separate from these parts, I found some sense of serenity from all of that. So, and I tell everyone now, if you want to understand, you know, pull apart parts, ask yourself, are they calm? Are they curious? Are they compassionate? Well, no, they're not. Well, then you need to listen to those parts and say, help me understand where you're coming from, part. Anyway, that's what I've gotten the most out of this book.
It's a nice tool, Ed. Yeah, curious, compassionate, calm. And if they're absent, there's a part there.
Exactly.
You need some attention. Yeah, thanks, Ed. Good tool. Sandra. Sandra gave the thumbs up. She liked that.
Thank you. This is another practical thing. at this point, being at the end of the book and understanding all of this, and I got a scathing email from one of my children, and it was so hard to take. And on pausing and getting past the first shock and recognizing the protectors that were probably there for her, and so on and so on, the compassion that's been said, but the compassion that came up has just taken away all of that other stuff. And as I consider my response now, it's calm, it's compassionate. I'm a little curious about what's actually going on there, but I'm not going to poke that thing. I'm just going to do a nice, calm, I don't need to jack up any more of her protectors, whatever's going on over there. And I don't need to. It's just amazing. And so I'm looking forward to that interaction with this co-regulation. I don't know, another term was used here, but that if I just, it doesn't really matter. It'll be lovely if it calms over on the other side. But for me to be calm and curious and compassionate and all the C's, courageous to actually respond at all, I'm excited to be putting all this stuff into practice in my life because I can see it so clearly now. Yeah, the book is great. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Sandra. And I agree. And, this that wraps up our time for answering questions, but I totally agree with what Sandra just said. This book is just really, laid out the concept of IFS in a really easy to understand way for anybody who's new to the concept. And then I had been introduced to it before, and Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score, and this just elaborated on it and sort of wrapped it up and tied it in a bow. And and also with the audio version left me with some tools to refer to, which have just been so helpful and I continue to use. And I really like some of the tools that our panelists shared today. The curious, calm, and compassionate sort of self-inventory checklist to see if a part's present, I thought was really a great tool. And so thank you so much to all our panelists for joining us today. Thank you all for joining us in the live stream and contributing to our live chat. And it's just been a fantastic way to contribute to a trauma-informed, safe space and heal together. So I'll turn this back over to Teresa for any closing remarks.
Thank you, Brendan, and thank you everyone for being with us today. Really nice to wrap up this third week, and again, look forward to our next week as we invite on Dick Schwartz to have a live Q&A with us, and we will be looking towards our audience that's tuning in on YouTube to also provide discussion questions that will be answered by Dick. So really appreciate you all coming and participating with this community. As a reminder, right now we will PATH, which is PATH for P, to Addiction and Trauma Healing, PATH. They are a TRF Therapeutic Alliance member, and they are offering a special PATH meeting, a 45-minute meeting that's happening right after our book club today. They'll open up the room, and then at this point, we'll drop in the YouTube link. We'll drop in the Zoom link into YouTube. You can pop that open, and then we'll have about 15 minutes where you can take a bio break, get some water, stretch, take a moment away from the screen, and then come back, and they'll start promptly at the 45-minute mark after the hour. And again, just a little bit about them. They started as a self-help group for therapists and then quickly evolved into a support group to help any member improve their understanding of healing addictions and trauma from an IFS-informed perspective. What else can I share about them? So participants will have the opportunity to share their own thoughts and reflections with others. And though some facilitators are IFS trained, we just want to say that it's not an IFS session and it's not considered therapy. So please join. And one last thing just to share, we did just sell out of our in-person tickets for the 33rd Annual Boston International Trauma Conference. However, it's a wonderful model this year where we're both going to be in person and virtual, so hybrid. So really encourage you to join us virtually. We will be selling virtual tickets up until the time of the conference, and you'll find 2 full days of pre-conference workshops and then 2 full days of keynote speakers, which is going to include Dick Schwartz, Bessel van der Kolk, Esther Perel, Janina Fisher, Rick Doblin, and so many more. And we're excited to see you there. So thank you all again for being a part of this wonderful community and joining us virtually. We're always asking how we can continue to improve, so feel free to touch base and share with us any feedback. And again, thank you, Brendan and the TRF team, for all of your work in putting this together. We'll see you next